Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me on the Anarchist Experience. My name is Robert Kruger. I am your host. I have today a special guest, Brent Lengel. He is a New York City-based artist, activist, and playwright, the host of Insurrection with Brent and Lengel on the StarCom radio network. If you would like to look up Brenton's works and just figure out what's going on with him, check him out at brentonlengel.com. So today we are going to just have a discussion, see if we can come to some sort of understanding about anarchism and what it is that people from my perspective think that anarchism could be, should be, whatever, and people from Brenton's position, what they believe it could be, should be, and we're just going to have as amicable of a conversation as we can. Obviously, we're going to disagree about a fair number of things. If you've been watching the show regularly, I do apologize for the last couple of weeks. I've been having to take care of real-world issues. So thank you for joining us again, though. Welcome to the show. Okay, and I would like to just kind of get a background from you a little bit as far as what your perspective is on anarchism and where your stance is. So if you could please inform us what it is that your stance is.
Well, I'll give a sort of a variation on Noam Chomsky's definition of anarchism. This is my own one that I submitted for the Al Jazeera Define Anarchism in 30 Seconds contest, which I don't think if it was ever aired. But what anarchism is to me is the general historical tendency, or I say the general tendency in people that those who claim hierarchical privileges for themselves or others have the burden of proof on them to prove that those privileges are legitimate. So you must, if you want to be my boss or my president or my king, you have to prove that claim. You have to prove that your authority is legitimate. And if you cannot prove that your authority is legitimate, then obviously it is illegitimate and must be dismantled by direct action, direct democracy, and, if necessary, revolution, depending upon the specific circumstances. And then it's also a very specific tradition which evolved out of the First International. A good way to think of anarchists is we were essentially anti-authoritarian communists, but we're coming from a non-Marxian background. So you've got the general tendency on one hand, and then you also have the historical tradition on the other.
Okay, just if anybody is watching that notices that Brenton's his internet connection does have a little bit of a stutter, so of course that has nothing to do with his arguments, so please bear with us. Technical difficulties are what they are. We try to work around them as best as possible. In any case, I would say that your original definition, as far as what it is that you stand for, as far as legitimacy, that is the burden of proof upon the person who's the claimant of the authority to provide evidence and proof that such an authority should exist. That sounds like a fairly reasonable thing to say. I do think that a lot of anarchists who come from my perspective, the anarcho-capitalist position, they kind of overlook the fact that if you look at the term anarchism, the anarchy is it includes the word archy, okay, and if you look at hierarchy, it also includes the word archy, and they come from the same root. And a lot of people don't like to say that, at least from my perspective, that it means anything other than no rulers. But hierarchy can technically include the word rule, includes the rule thing to it. So historically, anarchism is primarily, as far as I understand it, normally a non-hierarchical system, that they do not want hierarchies at all. Would you say that historically is accurate?
Well, yes and no, because if you even go back to very earliest anarchist thinkers like Bakunin, he says that he is for hierarchy of the bootmaker, for instance, in the matter of boots, or the train conductor in the matter of trains. However, that doesn't mean that because someone's really, really good at making boots or really, really good at making trains, they have, or running them or whatever, they should have the authority to maybe come and say, you know what, the community policy should be this because that makes my boot making easier. In other case, their authority is absolutely legitimate in certain circles, but then in others it is illegitimate.
Okay, all right. And then you also mentioned the term direct democracy. In this area, I would find really upsetting. So I definitely am not a proponent for direct democracy. I think that it is basically nothing more than mob rule. And I wouldn't accept a consensus or a majority or plurality for any decision. I would require a 100%, 100% approval and acceptance of some rule. Let's say, for example, if the 10 of us get together and we're all going to say put in $10 towards some sort of particular good or product. Let's say we're buying a gift for someone, and if ahead of time we 100% all agree that we're going to donate, we're going to put in, this $10 each, and then we have a vote from consensus or from direct democracy to what we're going to buy that gift, what kind of gift we're going to buy, then that's certainly legitimate form of direct democracy because everyone ahead of time has agreed 100%. But if you don't have 100% agreement, basically what you can see happen is the minority, whether it be an individual or a group, can have their rights basically taken away from them.
I think that's a very rational fear. I don't think it applies so much to anarchist direct democracy as it does to our understanding of anarchist direct democracy through a liberal lens. And when I say liberal, I don't mean the Democratic Party. I'm specifically talking about the historical tradition of liberalism in political philosophy, which encompasses everything from the American founding fathers to Ron Paul to Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. So what happens is that in liberalism, you have a democracy, but it is not really a democracy. It is sort of a carefully managed and controlled way in which we elect rulers and leaders to essentially tell us what to do for a set period of time. We agree that this person will be our president for 4 years, and there's nothing we can do about that once he's in power. The thing about direct democracy as it works and as it functions, for instance, at Occupy Wall Street, was that, yes, we would make decisions based upon 100% consensus or sometimes no consensus whatsoever. But what it was counterbalanced with was the ability to always disassociate from the group. So you go out with your friends, you agree on some venture. For instance, you're all going to go out to see, Guardians of the Galaxy. And suddenly one person on the way to Guardians of the Galaxy says, I don't want to see Guardians of the Galaxy. I want to see, Hunger Games or whatever. That person can always leave the group and go see the movie that they want to see. And the group is still in consensus that they are going to see Guardians of the Galaxy. So you have to, the rights of the minority are protected under anarchism by the ability to disassociate from the group and also by the principle of autonomy, which is another very, very important thing to traditional leftist anarchists.
Okay, all right. So the opportunity to opt out is theoretically always there. Now the question comes then, if you're living in a community where we're talking about rules that are going to be applied to people's living arrangements, where they live, and what's going to happen to their the land that they're on, the house that they're in, things of that nature. It's kind of hard for someone to accept the idea that, well, yeah, you could just move. uh, it puts them in a very awkward situation where, all right, well, I already put through the effort to make this place my home. Now you're making rules up that I didn't agree to, and how am I supposed to move or leave this agreement? Now, in your particular view of these things, would you say, well, they can just simply say, I'm not going to participate, and if you don't, just I'm going to say, here, my place.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's what I'd say. Anarchists do technically. I have never personally seen within anarchist culture or within anarchist a desire to uproot people from their homes. In fact, one of the big things we did at Occupy was actually move a family who into an evicted home. So we're very big on making sure that everyone has their own space and their own ability to, realize life however they want to realize it. So the general tendency, most anarchists that I know would not try to uproot someone in the home. Now, assuming a community does want someone to move for whatever reason, what would happen there is the entire community, including this person and this person's friends, would get together in a general assembly and talk it out. And they would be working very, very hard to come to a conclusion that everyone can deal with. That's also a big important thing about consensus-based decision-making. Its goal is 100% agreement. It takes a very long time to do that sometimes, but there's stuff that you can do there. So, if you have a valid claim on your property, for instance, your home, I would say odds are 99.999% of the time you will be able to find other anarchists who think you should keep your property. And you can bring them to the GA and say, we feel that this should stay the way that it is. And other anarchists will make their case, and you'll go back and forth and back and forth. Now, you might think of that as people forcing you to move, like if the GA comes to a decision that you don't agree with, you might say, well, I disassociate, at which point the people in the GA can say, well, we really, really disagree with this, so we're going to organize and start using direct action tactics to try to get you to move. Now, that's not going to be violence. That might be, setting up outside your house, letting you know that your presence is disruptive, and eventually you're going to come out and go, guys, quit being dicks. And then they're going to say, no, you quit being a dick. And the two of you, if you want to live together, will have to come to some sort of a consensus. And really, let's assume that, you're in just a very hostile community for some reason. Normally, if a community gets like that, it's because you're doing something to make them mad. But let's just assume they're being very unreasonable. What I would say is, why would you want to live in that community? Why would you want to continue to associate with those people who you don't like, and they don't like you, and you don't want to deal with them? I would say, yeah, you can be stubborn and keep your house and not go anywhere else, but at the end of the day, you're just putting a whole bunch of stress on yourself for no reason. It's also important to note that it would be much, much easier to move in an anarchist society, in a left anarchist society, because there is no real centralization of private property. So you don't have to go and find this big landlord who owns all of these buildings and follow his terms. You can go and find an unused, unopened building, or you can go find another community of like-minded people who will almost definitely have something for you to move into. I mean, have you ever had like a really bad roommate? Do you really need the police to deal with that situation? Or, well, sometimes, I guess, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. There's scenarios often asked when dealing with people who are trying to understand anarcho-capitalism, and the question comes up then, what if you have a person or a group of people who are living on some private land that they've homesteaded, that theirs, that this land is their home and their farm, for example, and they're doing stuff that you would, you and the rest of the society around you find abhorrent. They're a cult, let's say, for example, where children are reared, girl children are reared to age at, let's say 13, 14 years old, to become the concubines of the elder men. And the boys, when they're born, after, maybe 10% of them were killed or something like that, or aborted, whatever. And so you've got this cult that's living in this community, and they're completely self-sufficient. They have no ties to the outdoors world that they need. They certainly can trade and do things that they interact with other people, but this, society becomes, people become aware of what's going on here and find it abhorrent and want to put an end to it. But they, what do they do? In the case of the anarcho-capitalist position, it tends to be along the lines of, well, basically persuade the people who own the land around them to erect barriers on their property to prevent the travel of these people through their property, or things of that nature. You ostracize them and just don't have anything to do with them. That's some answers, and then there are other answers that go through. But in your type of anarcho-communist system, how would that be dealt with?
Well, what I would say in an anarcho-communist system, or not just anarcho-communist, by the way, but like anything from an individualist anarchist to a mutualist, usually what you're describing is a specific tactic that anarcho-capitalists think is an effective tactic to use against these people. So what you're talking about is direct action. Your idea of what direct action should be is to erect these walls as a way of kind of starving them out, which, that might be a very effective tactic, depending upon, the specific instances. What anarcho-communists and leftist anarchists would probably do is something similar, but I don't think we would hold it down to just one or two tactics. What would happen would be the community would get together in a GA, talk about the problem, talk about why action is necessary and what kind of action, and the direct action that would then come out of that would be anything from, I would say, community ostracism, which is a very powerful effect. Sabotage of the operation. We would probably distribute pamphlets and attempt to educate people who are going towards this cult. And we would also provide a lot of services for people who want to escape the cult. As far as like something like children, or if these people are like, let's say, they want to engage in essentially terrorism against the surrounding communities, you're dealing with some creepy like Craster-like society, it might be that they would organize a militia and physically attack them. However, that would be a very, very serious situation that would really require a huge amount of consensus in the community, and from what I've seen, most anarchists would not be ready to do that unless they believed that there was such a serious threat, there was no other option. So when we talk about diversity of tactics, we're not saying that we want to be violent instantly. But at times, the use of violence is necessary, but I would say it's necessary only as an absolute last resort and must be handled very, very carefully.
Okay, so in a similar vein, the anarcho-capitalists that I talk to and myself would say that sending in, I don't know, airdropping some pamphlets or some little cards that say, "Don't like living there. Don't like the idea of having to marry your uncle. Come on over to our place. We've got a shelter for you, and we'll help you escape. Pull up pull up a cell phone and call such and such number, and we will help you out." Something along those lines, where people were offering a voluntary exchange, where people who are stuck in those situations, who don't want to be there, have an opportunity to leave. Things like that. Even in our group, there have been people who have basically said, look, I'll go ahead and go on in with my friends, and we will use violence to go in and to take these children from this situation, because we're defending their rights. We are using the act of self-defense or defense of others to respond to the initiation of violence, and use violence only in that. The non-aggression principle is basically an explanation as to when it's appropriate to use violence to defend something. If you're not the aggressor and you're using violence only in self-defense, then it is appropriate or acceptable use of violence. So in this type of environment, I think we can somewhat agree that basically the general plan is to try to persuade, and then move forward. If persuasion does not work, then ostracism. And if ostracism does not work, then potentially escalating to additional levels. Okay, so we obviously have had a history of going back and forth on the anarcho-capitalist and the anarcho-communist debate forum, and I wanted to go through a couple of questions with you, if you don't mind, and I'm going to try to drill through a series of questions in order to get you towards where you're going to agree with me. And if we could save the "well, I don't agree with that" till the end, after we've gone through the series of questions. I don't if I ask you a question and you believe it starts with a false premise, let's save that till the end. So let's just start with some basic points. One, do you accept that if there is something that is currently unowned, unclaimed, no one has even seen it before, and someone else goes out there and works it to convert it into something new, like, for example, they go out into a forest, chop a limb off of a tree, and then whittle it into some shape, like some sculpture, and takes it home with them, that this is their property, that they own it.
Like if they go and they make a sculpture, do they own the sculpture? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. They take something from an unowned state, from where there is no claims, nobody has.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter about claims or whatever. I don't really particularly care about homesteading. I don't think it's a valid way to claim property rights, but at the same time, I would say that in that very specific instance that you lined out, yeah, that's their property, and I don't want their sculpture, so why would I even care? Now, I would also say that just because they went and made the sculpture... I would say just because they went and made the sculpture... Yeah, sorry about that. Just because they went and made the sculpture does not then mean that they get to claim the forest, nor even necessarily the trees at which they took the limbs off of.
Okay. All right. So to try to get through it very quickly, let's we can expand on the details of each of the steps, in the afterwards, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. So basically, the fruit of your labor, assuming that the stuff that you're working with is not owned by someone else, You own the fruits of labor. Exactly.
I would say it's impossible for anyone to own the fruits of your labor but you. Like, physically
Okay.
impossible.
And this would also apply to, let's say, if you go out into uncharted area of land and then cut down all the trees that were on the land and bulldoze some of the, you know, unappealing features, and then create a house using whatever materials and your own labor. Assuming that nobody owns the stuff that you're working with, you've made a house, you've made a domicile, you make a garden. That this garden and this house are yours.
Would depend on how that house is used.
Okay, so it's used for me to sleep in, to store goods that I use on a personal basis. Um, in this particular, case, it's just basically your standard, house on the prairie kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's totally yours. I will say, unless there is one corollary there, unless the way you are using that house hurts other people in a very serious way. But I can't imagine how it would.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Let's say I'm using my house to generate power using some sort of uranium, and I happen to be immune to radiologic, things. But the society around me isn't, so now I'm polluting the entire environment. That would be an example. It's a far-fetched example, whatever.
Right.
But we're certainly not talking about a situation where you're causing other people's, experiences, or you're harming other people. That's not part of the position.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then, if at this point in time I've gone out and I've done this and I made a garden and so on, say I make a garden that's extraordinarily large, I make it into a garden that's, say, 40 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I happen to have oxen or other animals that I've tamed to do work with me while I'm going out and farming this land. So now I have a farm and a ranch in-house, and it's all as a direct result of my labor or my family's labor, and they're all a part of an agreeing unit. We're all gung-ho, let's work together. This would be ours as a family. Is that correct?
Yes, unless there was some sort of coercion in the agreement that you have with your family,
Right.
like if you're a cult leader, for instance.
Right. Okay, and there's no, in this example, there would be no restriction on the children or the wife or the husband um, to keep them on this land and say you can't leave, you can do whatever the heck you want. And even we actually made agreement with each other that if one of us chooses to opt out, that we've got 5 of us, so they get 20% of the land to do as they will.
I don't see any problem with that agreement. That said, like, somebody else in a different situation who handles it differently might cause problems that might then get direct action tactics used against them by the community. So let's say you've got a family, the father sort of runs it by beating his kids and terrifying them into obeying him. Other people might look at that and say, that is really messed up. And then they'd go and they'd talk about it and say, is this okay? Is it right to allow it? And if they judged that no, the way he's treating his family is coercive and exploitative, then they might marshal direct action tactics against him. Could take anything from a protest to to giving an ability for people to run away, that kind of thing.
Okay, so let's just assume for the sake of argument that all of the examples and all the questions that I'm going to put forward are based upon the idea that the person who is leading this particular group is not threatening anyone with violence, not using violence upon anyone, and they're not directly outsourcing negative consequences like pollution.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Then after a period of working the land and so on, we've come up with a surplus where we have additional amounts of wheat or eggs or whatever it happens to be. This excess that we have, it is ours still. Is that correct?
Would really depend upon the size of the excess and what the community judges it to be. So, let's say you've stored up a whole bunch of wheat, and people are starving outside the community, and you have enough wheat to feed everyone.
Okay.
But you say, no, I don't want to do that, and people say, why not? And you say, it's mine. You have to make me king, or else you can't have my wheat and you die. Then the community will take steps to protect itself from you and to survive. But, once again, that's really more on your behavior with that specific stuff. I think what's important to remember is that anarchism is an ideology that is distinct from legalistic liberalism. So you're not going to find in left anarchy like a single set rule for approaching every situation. It's more situation-based, and it is based upon people's understanding of these situations. So at any time, people can choose to do something else.
Right. Okay, so as far as I understand it, if the person were to obtain, if this family were to be very efficient in their use of the land, and they've created a surplus of wheat, and other people in the area have been less efficient with their use of land and have not created a surplus of wheat, and we have some sort of event, hurricane comes through, whatever. And it places the people in the surrounding areas in a position of need where they are going to starve, that you would sanction, not just sanction, but actually promote the use of the initiation of violence towards the people of possessing this stuff if they refused to give it freely to the community.
Only if it's a matter of life and death for the rest of the community, and only if the good that can come out of distributing it to the community is outweighs the negatives of using tactics against these people. Now, what I will is, if you're in a situation like that where everybody is like at the edge, Hurricane Katrina comes.
You're breaking.
Maybe you've not enough to help. Oh, and you've got a surplus of wheat. Maybe not enough to help everyone, but enough to help a lot of people and save some lives. I would say that you have a moral and ethical duty to do that. And I would also say that it is in your best interest to help those people, because a lot of prestige comes with it, and you make a lot of connections, and they will be able to help you further on down the line. That's sort of comes with the anarchist idea of mutual aid. It's distinct from charity. It's not a one-sided relationship where one side gives and takes. It is a side where both aspects of the society exchange favors. So you give the favor of helping with the wheat in exchange with the informal understanding that that favor will be repaid. And it will be repaid to your liking and the community's liking, and if it's not, you guys go and talk about it, and people decide who's right and what to do.
Okay. So in the example that we have, we've got farmer, big silo, lots of wheat, hurricane, starvation. Now coming from the anarcho-capitalist perspective, the offers would be made for providing trade, where they would say, it's wheat, in exchange we will do X, Y, or Z to create a amicable working relationship. If there is no agreement as to what can be traded, then At that point, if the farmer refuses to trade, the use of violence to obtain the wheat because of pragmatic reasons that it prevents starvation would probably be used, that people would actually go ahead and steal the food. However, they would have debt to this, not necessarily a debt, but the person would have a claim of a demand of redress that was legitimate, that their losses were unacceptable and would authorize them to use force to reach redress in the future. Similar to the cabin in the woods example that might have made, that made on multiple occasions, where if you're stuck in a freezing forest, let's say your airplane is going to crash, you take a parachute and land somewhere, and you see that there's a shelter and a refrigerator where there's food, and you see cereal boxes on the top of the refrigerator. Do you break in to save your life, or do you starve to death? Of course, some anarcho-capitalists they think that they're so principled that they would say, all right, well, no, I would never violate somebody else's property to save my own life. I think that's a little ridiculous. You break in, you do what's pragmatically necessary, and then you pay compensation as appropriate to mitigate the losses that were sustained by the person. I guess this kind of brings me to a point that I'd like to make clear, at least in my mind. The way I understand morality is that it's a conflation of two different things, that it's a choice that is a pragmatic choice, and it is also a choice that is whether the person who is the recipient of the act has the right to use violence to prevent you from doing it to them, or to seek redress if you did successfully do it to them and when they would stop you. So, for example, is it moral for someone to, I don't know, rape somebody? Obviously, it is immoral for somebody to rape someone. Pragmatically, maybe, I'm horny as all hell and I want to go ahead and get my rocks off, so whatever. That's real pragmatism. It's just, a selfish self-need, selfish demand. So that part's really out of the way, but definitely we can see that it is within the right of the person to use violence to prevent that action from occurring. And I think that this duality of understanding morality works in all cases. Would you say that it's legitimate or not?
Well, you broke up a little bit there, but I think I get what you're saying. What I would say is I would not define pragmatism as, because that's actually not pragmatic.
Okay, you're breaking up on
I am very oh. Hang on. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, I'll try, because I don't think I can do much right now. Pragmatism is not indulging in one's antisocial urges. Pragmatism is making the best possible realistic call for the situation that surrounds you. So someone who wants to be a rapist is not behaving pragmatically, they are behaving sadistically. So I would say it's not balancing your urges, because humans all have competing urges. We have an urge for sex, but we also have an urge to protect ourselves and other people. So I would say that I would not consider like rape to be like something that needs to be balanced in a moral judgment. But yeah, like I don't think there's anything good that can come out of rape.
It's a pretty clear, cut and dried type of thing. But let's say if well, there's some people who have come up with examples, but let's just say that if there were a pragmatic concern that if you don't do X, Y, or Z, that your children are going to starve. Even if it is a violation of another person and another person's property, then you may actually, under a moral comprehension, under moral comprehension, you may actually do it. But then the other person may also have the right to try to stop you from doing it.
Well, everybody's got the right to try to stop somebody from doing it, but I think at the end of the day, it's really up to the other people around this situation to judge its morality. That to a situation where it's your life or your children's life or the life.
Breaking up again.
When you get into a situation where it's your life or the life of someone else's, the moral issue is not whether or not you used violence, but was that violence actually necessary? Would another tactic have realistically worked better? It would be immoral to, for instance, me just jump immediately to shanking you to take your wheat to save my kids if all I had to do was come to you and talk about it. And maybe you'd be mad about it, but eventually we could come to things. Now, if I literally either I shank you or my kids die, then I think people would say that's awful, and people always are able to go for redress and of grievances, but that situation would depend on a lot of very specific factors, and I don't think it's useful to set up a universal rule for dealing with it 100% of the time.
Okay, it's been my experience that it works, but we'll move on back to the scenario. All right, so I have produced a surplus. There is no countervailing need that says we're going to starve to death if we don't have your wheat.
Mm-hmm.
There are other providers of food that exist that are out there. Now it turns out that people do kind of really like bread. And even though they've got plenty of chicken, pork, and soy products out there, they would want to prefer bread. So they're not necessarily going to starve if they don't get your bread, but they really do want your bread. At this point in time, then taking this surplus to its theoretical large limit, let's say that they've got some insane number of extra wheat from their land. Let's throw out some arbitrary number like 500,000 pounds of wheat that they've produced. Is it still theirs?
I am honestly confused as to.
Okay, you broke up again.
I'm confused as to why they would ever produce that much wheat, and why they would ever just keep it stored up for itself to rot. That does not strike me as rational, sane human behavior. I would think that would be something akin to hoarding, which would mean they have far deeper problems than simply having really good wheat that people want, and they probably need some medical attention.
All right, but setting aside the number one, let's assume that they've got storage facilities that prevent the loss from it being destroyed through rotting. Number two, let's just for the sake of argument assume that the reason why that they're doing it is some sort of they've got some plan that they're going to do X, Y, or Z with that wheat for rational purposes, that these people are not insane. The question comes then, even though they produced an excessive amount of wheat that they've got, is it still theirs? Do they own the fruits of their labors?
I would say it is, but I would also say, let's say the community disagrees. They feel that they want to keep this wheat for this purpose, and other people say, no, we don't want you to keep the wheat for that purpose. You would be free to say, no, I'm keeping it in my shelter, and the rest of the community would be free to use tactics that they feel are effective and moral to try to get you to give up the wheat. Say what?
Give me some examples, if you would.
Okay, so you've got 10 tons of really awesome bread that you're not giving out to anybody else, and people are like, hey, we really like this bread. Why are you not giving it out? And you explain, well, I want to save it for X, Y, Z. I think people would say, somebody might say, that's stupid. Why do I don't think that that's a realistic thing to save it for. You just give it out, and then, or at least give some of it out, and then you would talk.
Okay, you're breaking up again.
You would talk with them. You'd present your case. They'd present their case, and at the end of the day, if they're still mad enough at you to waste their time, using tactics against you, I guess they could. But then, you could go to the community and go, "This guy's being a dick. Can you please tell him to knock it off?" And then other people would come and say, "Dude, will you stop camping out on his property and, trying to get his wheat? It's just bread. Just wait, and you'll get some later. Or here, have a freaking lollipop."
Okay, so you would be okay with the proponents for getting the bread to actually enter into his property and squat it?
If he feels that that is a valid tactic, I might be down with it. Or I might decide, he's being irrational and the dude, cut it out. It would depend on the specific situation, and, you could easily come up to me and go, "Dude, this guy is squatting on my property. He's being crazy. Can you help me out?" And I'd go and find 5 or 6 other people, and I'd go over and be like, "Okay, Ted, will you please not be so excited about this wheat? Can we do something else, please?"
And he says no and continues to sit in the middle of the field so that your combine can't go through it.
Well, I mean, I would say that if Ted is doing that, he either has a very, very, very good reason, or he is sick, like he's mentally damaged in some way, or a little bit of the two. Anytime somebody is behaving antisocially or aggressively towards someone, it's as a result of an unfulfilled need. Maybe Ted wants respect from you. Like maybe he tried to get a job with you and you said no because he's not good at wheat, so he's mad about that, and he's just like, "I really, really need this bread." So we'll go and talk to Ted and figure out what a better solution for him might be than squatting it. And the better solution might be to just be like, "Dude, just give Ted some bread. He's just one guy." Or the better solution might be, "Ted, we're going to remove you from this place and get you to a doctor because clearly you've got very serious problems." And I think the way we would make that decision would be, I would sort of crowdsource it to all of the people around me, and we would come to a general consensus on what the best way to treat Ted is.
Okay, so even though we've established that I own this plot of land that I've developed myself, or my family together with me have developed, that I cannot forcibly remove somebody from it without a consensus from the society.
I would say it would be very, very bad precedent for you to forcibly remove Ted. And I say that because if you do that, you might decide, "I'm just freaking sick of this guy, I'm going to get rid of him." If you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to piss off everybody around you who thinks that maybe you were too harsh with Ted. And that is going to cause political fallout for you later on, and you may have a hard time getting the supplies that you need to continue to do this wheat. So it is in your best interest to appeal to the other people around you so that we can figure out like what's the best way to handle this situation. I'll give you a great example. I had a nutso Alex Jones guy who's been e-stalking me for the last couple of days, and he goes and butts into conversations that I'm having with ANCOMs and ANCAPs and starts wanting to talk about global warming and the NWO and all of this dark night hyper elite stuff when we're sitting there talking about property rights. So to handle him, I appealed to everybody else in the group, and I said, "Look, dude, you're being incredibly inappropriate here. You are stalking me from place to place. You have butted into somebody else's conversation, and now you're trying to make it all about what you want to talk about when we were talking about something completely different. That is incredibly rude. Why are you doing that? What's wrong with you? And he eventually backed off. Because when you get the power of the community behind you, and even the ANCAPs in the thread took my side and said, "Guy, we're trying to talk about property rights. If you want to talk about, the NWO, go find a group to talk about the NWO. There's thousands of them." So I feel that that's a much better tactic to take when someone is being unreasonable than immediately jumping to ban or immediately jumping to grab by the scruff of the neck and throw out.
Okay, so you might receive some sort of negative repercussions from the society as a group, as far as social ostracism, things like that. However, then if I did it anyway, and I'm fine with the consequences, am I legitimately protecting my, using my authority over my land to expel this person from it? I'm not using any amount of violence exceeding what is necessary to remove this person. I've tried talking to them. I've tried, having other people come and talk to him from the community. I've taken a variety of actions that, prior to this, and then I basically say, all right,
that's it.
My son here is going to grab you by the ear and drag you out.
I would say the morality of that action is up to you and the other people in your society and the other people working to decide among yourselves. That is, if you want that on your conscience, will agree with you, and they do agree with you enough, great, sure, it's moral. If you know in the back of your head that, what, I was mad at that guy, I jumped to attacking him way too fast, and other people are going to be able to look at that and say, yeah, you totally did. So I think it's a conversation. And that's what I would really say that morality is. It's a conversation between the individual and society, and what is moral at a specific time and place is what comes out of that conversation, what the consensus is, or the general consensus.
All right, so Ivan Munoz commented in the chat here, and I just want to clarify, something as far as this idea that it's a ridiculous amount of wheat. It's just a scenario to see a breaking point to develop a logical conclusion. But instead of having him collect an extremely large amount of wheat, let's say instead they have a very efficient farm. They're producing a lot of wheat, and they find other people who have other things that they would like to have, and they make a trade with these other people for what it is that they have, in order to satisfy both people's demand. They find somebody who is a very good artist, and they trade some wheat for some artwork. They find somebody who is extraordinarily good at making decks, and so they trade wheat for a nice deck. They find an architect and some people who are really good with carpentry and so on, and so they build a really nice advanced house that looks really, really nice, and has a lot of features that are very enjoyable. So now they don't necessarily have an incredible surplus of wheat. They've got just a lot of wealth instead. In this point, it's not one specific product that they have, but they have a lot of wealth, and they have more wealth than, let's say, some other people who have not been very efficient with the use of their land. So at this point, then, because there's this wealth disparity, and it is a significant amount of wealth disparity, but all of the land, all the work that went into it to create this wealth was a result of their own direct labors. Assuming that you have this immense wealth disparity, is it legitimate for those people who are coming from the, well, we don't have as much, to go in and take what they want from the guy who has, from the family who has a lot?
I would say on that instance that the disparity in wealth is not the problem necessarily. It's a problem, or I would say it's a symptom of the problem. The problem is when that disparity in wealth gives those people more social power, and it gives them the ability to hurt the people who do not have as much. Let's say you build such a big estate that you're using up all of the available land in an area, and people cannot farm and
Okay,
cannot feed themselves.
yeah, that would be changing the scenario significantly, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make this clear though. I don't feel that realistically it is possible for a person to, on their own labor, by themselves, raise a giant estate. I don't think that can be physically done. That can only happen by collaborating with lots and lots of other people. And so I would say that, like, you go and you build a giant, really nice deck with some people. You go and you build a really nice property. The people that you're working with, I think, deserve the fruits of that labor as much as you do. Now, if they say, no, we're just building this for you because we like you, you help me out later on, that's fine. Yeah, but the idea that a single person can create and run and maintain an entire factory or an entire, 100-acre estate or an entire, like,
we're not there yet. We're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting there. Okay. All right. So, obviously we've got a person who can at some point in time produce excess. They have the ability to produce surplus. Human beings are capable of producing more than they consume.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's got a family that's fairly large. Let's say, I don't know, he's got, 10 children, and each one of them has, like, 6 children. So he's got, in essence, like, let's see, that'd be 60 people plus the mother and father. They've all been working together in this, fairly large ranch.
Is this some weirdo Quiverful cult? Is this like?
No, it's just they've got a family that, the girls end up finding guys, the guys end up finding girls, or guys finding guys. It doesn't matter. There's no sexism or no gender preference restrictions. You've got gay couples and straight couples and all that kind of stuff. In fact, polyamory is probably there too. Whatever.
Well, yeah, you'd need that for 60 kids.
All right, so you've got a large variety of people who have all come together in this collectively, everybody's happy working together to make this thing happen, and they're all content and pleased with it. Now, you've got this fairly large amount of wealth that is created, and they're producing, a fairly large estate and ranch and so on, and they decide that they're going to go into some other industry, and because they've got all this capital wealth that they produced on their own, they have the ability to trade with other people for other capital goods as well, or maybe they've just actually produced consumables that other people want to trade. So let's say they offer somebody, what we're going to do is we're going to give you enough food that you can feed your family and your friend's family and your friend's family for the next 10 years. And all you have to do is just come by and get it. Right? So they've got this agreement, and the guy says, all right, that sounds like a good deal to me. And he and these other groups, they come out and they're going to build a building that houses materials that produce things, like they're creating a factory essentially. Okay, now they've made this trade, and there's no coercion that's going on there. There's no environmental. You're going to starve if you don't get this. It's just that they find that it's the easiest way for them to obtain food for the next 10 years for their group. So they are interested in having their food needs satisfied by an easy way, instead of having other options that they could have been a part of this commune that exists out on the side, that they could have just grown their own food. or together as a collaborative, they could have grown their own food. But since this guy's doing it so efficiently, this family's doing it so efficiently, the trade is a significantly less work and effort for them to do. So they're happy to go ahead and build this building and build the machinery and put it all together for them in exchange. Would that be a legitimate trade?
I would say that would depend on the conditions around them and also the people that work directly for them. So,
breaking up.
And everyone has freely agreed to it, but then suddenly, they start looking at it and they're like, "Look, Ted is getting really, really powerful. He's doing so much, and I feel that while I physically sit there and work this stuff, I'm doing all the work, and Ted is keeping all of the profits, or such a vast majority of it that I feel it's unfair."
Okay.
What would happen then? Yeah, what would happen then is that the community, the anarchists involved, would go and join a new group and create a new group to oppose Ted, and say, "You are being unfair. We want you to do this, and if you don't do this, we will withhold our services from you."
Okay. So this group, they get together and they say, "You know what, Ted? We like the 10-year thing, but looking at what it is that we're actually making and what it looks like it's going to actually do, we're not comfortable with it. So we're going to go ahead and opt out. We don't want to be a part of this anymore." And they're, let's say, 20% in. At this point in time, Ted then goes to some other group of machinists and carpenters and so on, and says to them, "All right, they did 20%, so I'm giving their 2 years of food. I'd like to offer you the 8 years of food remaining to finish the job," and then they take the job. Would that be legitimate?
I would say what would happen then is you've really, really pissed off the people that were previously working with you. And you know what? If their grievance is legitimate, they are going to organize against both you and the scabs, essentially, who you've brought in, the new people that you've offered the job. So will it be legitimate? I would say depends upon your ability to make your case to the community at large, and also it would depend upon your ability to keep that business together in the face of tactics. Now, let's say the tactics are very effective that is being used against you. You're losing a ton of money. The other people can't get to work because they're being blocked. I would say it would be completely illegitimate for you to call in, say, the Pinkerton Agency to use violence against the people who are using tactics against you. I think what needs to happen is all of you need to sit down and resolve your grievance together, and if you cannot, you need to go and appeal to the larger community.
Okay, so let's say that the group of workers who did the 20% of work, they are going to set up a human barricade, with crossed arms and so on. And at this point, then you have the quote-unquote scabs that are wanting to, travel, and these people are preventing them from freely traveling. You don't believe that that is a use of violence or the threat of violence to, inhibit somebody else's freedom?
I wouldn't call it direct violence. It's definitely force. But you're not actually harming them. You're simply preventing them from moving from a place to place. So I would say that should not be handled like if they were shooting the people who came through.
Sure.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that that's violence.
Okay, and the people who were the workers who wanted to go take the job, if they were to, Red Rover type of running, to break the line through, that would be the initiation of violence and not legitimate. Is that your claim?
I mean, it might be legitimate. I can't see how, and I don't think it would be a good tactic. There doesn't seem to be a direct threat to their life if they don't break through that line.
Well, if,
So,
as far as their options are concerned, you know, they have something that they would like to do, and you're preventing them from doing it, and that if they were to do whatever it is that they wanted to do, no one is harmed by their actions. So
well, no, but people will be harmed by their actions because they're going to crash through the line. They're going to physically come into contact.
no, no, no. I'm talking about them going to work
Mhm.
is not harming anyone.
Well, no, it is harming people because it's harming the original workers who were getting ripped off. So when they come in and try to take this job, what they're doing is they are absolutely hurting the people because they're interfering in this struggle between between one powerful force and another. And that does directly hurt them because it threatens their livelihood and it threatens the livelihoods of their family.
But the thing is that these other people who have the 10, that have put in the 20%, they have other ways of obtaining their livelihood.
Well, yeah, but the people who are trying to break through also have other ways of obtaining their work. So you've got an impasse.
And they're choosing one, and the other people are prohibiting them from, choosing that.
Well, yeah, because once again, that choice that they're making hurts those people. And I would say that is not a good choice for them to make.
Okay, how does it hurt them?
Because it threatens their livelihood, and
they have other sources that they can go to. They can go to the local commune where they can work the land, and they can be a part of a communal effort to provide for their own needs by doing some sort of shared working type of scenario, whatever the non-hierarchical system that happens to be in the area.
Well, if they have a better option, why are they? If they have a better option or a just as good option, why are they bothering to organize and strike?
Oh, it's not just as good. That's the point. But they do have the other option. It's inefficient in comparison.
Well, I'd say if they have a poorer option, the people who are striking are going to weigh the effort that it takes to strike and block and go through all of these tactics against the benefit of just saying, you know what, screw it, and going and building something else on their own and working somewhere else. I mean, when you use tactics, I got to explain this real quick.
Okay.
It is exhausting. It is a huge slog. No one wants to do it. I mean, occasionally people are really mad and just want to go out and get it out, but really over a long period of time, it is very, very difficult to maintain a strike. It is very difficult to maintain a block. So the only reason people would go and really dig their heels in and do that stuff is if it is a very, very serious matter to them that seriously threatens their life and they don't have other options.
Okay, so you're saying that in this scenario, what I'm proposing, just in all likelihood, wouldn't happen. These people would just say, well, I don't like the deal, I'm going to go back to the commune.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that was one of the major things that happened in Anarchist Catalonia. You had private farmers who wanted to keep their farm, did not want to collectivize, and they were allowed to keep their property, they were allowed to keep their farm, nobody messed with them. But the communes provided so much of a better deal for the workers and so much more food and protection that all of the workers, if these farmers weren't fair to the people working for them, they would just leave and go to the commune because the communes themselves did not have the profit motive. They did not have this idea that, save a bunch of it for 1 or 2 or 5 people. And so they could pay more, they could produce more efficiently, and it was in just about everybody's rational self-interest to go and join the commune. Some people chose that it wasn't, and that was fine, and they got to maintain their property. The only people who had their property stripped from them were the latifundians, who were essentially feudal lords, and they were fighting with the fascists, so screw them.
Right. Okay. So as far as I understand it, we're saying that, both of us are actually saying that this is a non-issue, that basically if one group decides that it is inappropriate use of their time, that they feel they're not getting paid what they want, then they can opt out, and then the other group who happens to find a better value of it, they feel that they're getting more out of it, certainly can do so, and they trade places. So this is all still voluntary, no problem. All right, so the scenario
can I add a little bit to that?
Sure.
I agree that is not a big problem or much of a problem. However, it's not a big problem when there are real alternatives to it, like the communes. When they're under a capitalist system, or what you would call a corporatist system, even though that's not the correct definition, there are not actually good options for people to go elsewhere, in my opinion. So I would say that taking the scenario that we've just described and putting it into what I understand as capitalism, it is a big problem, because then the police get sent after them, and the strike breakers are sent in, and that gets really, really nasty.
Okay, so as far as I understand it, you would say that the population of people who would call themselves ANCOMs dwarfs the population that would call themselves ANCAPs. Would you say that that's an accurate statement?
Historically, absolutely.
I'm thinking about like right now.
Right now, I would have to look at the actual numbers. The big problem is that what we've had essentially is there's a huge amount of money and political maneuverings behind the libertarian movement in the United States. And when I say that, I don't mean the anarchy. I mean like the Ron Paul, Jeffrey Tucker, Ludwig von Mises. There's a ton of support behind that. In America, there is not the same kind of support behind anarchist communism. We were destroyed by the state during the Red Scare and before. So, and the FBI infiltrated our groups, and we and other leftist groups like the Black Panthers were essentially beaten, jailed, murdered, and crushed by the United States government, and then buried under a deluge of propaganda. Now, if you go somewhere else in the world, you go to Europe, you go to Argentina, anywhere other than America, I would say anarcho-communists and anarcho-syndicalists vastly outnumber what the Europeans would call liberals, which would be anarcho-capitalists, libertarians, minarchists, that kind of.
Okay. So let's see. If we had to guess in the United States, the percentage of the population who is anarcho-capitalist versus anarcho-communist, 5 to 6, 7 to 4, the ratio, what percentage would you say is anarcho-communist? Just a ballpark guess.
I have absolutely no idea, because there hasn't been actual data on this. I would need to see physical survey data, and not just from like our Facebook groups. What I will say is I had on my show Mark Bray, who is the author of a book called Translating Anarchy, The Anarchism of Occupy Wall Street. And I was involved very heavily in the Occupy movement. What he found at Occupy was that 33%, something around 30 to 43% of organizers identified as some version of... Can we get rid of that Johnny guy?
Yep.
Yeah. He found that 33 to 43% of identified as anarchists. Beyond that, a total of 73% of organizers, mostly from the millennial generation, identified, while they didn't use the word or anarcho-communist or anarcho-syndicalist, they had anarchist policies direct democracy. They were skeptical of capitalism, and they were overall anti-corporate and skeptical of government authority. And something like 82% had mentioned that, I guess could vaguely fall under the category of radical. And then you combine that with the fact. Say what?
Radical what?
Radical leftist. So that would mean anything from like social democrat, communist to like a tanky.
Okay.
Stalinist.
All right. So the point that I'm trying to bring home, because we're running out of time, we've only got about 6 minutes left, is this: that as far as I understand it, in the social media world, and in fact in the world just outside, around us, the number of people who tend to be, I don't know, coming from a Democrat type of perspective, let's just assume that we can throw them all into the anarcho-communist view.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I wouldn't call it I know why you're saying Democrat, but don't call it that because it'll confuse people about the Democratic Party.
Okay. But we're just going to go on general assumptions. Okay. Obviously, we know there are going to be some people who are Democrats who would actually fall under the anarcho-capitalist perspective, and there are some that would come under the anarcho-communist perspective if we force them to choose between the two.
What do I think they would choose?
As a general rule, I would say, would you agree that Democrats would, if you force them to choose between anarcho-communism and anarcho-capitalism, that at least, some fairly large percentage of them would fall under the anarcho-communist perspective?
No, actually not. The Democratic Party in America is actually very, very hostile to anarcho-communists.
Okay, so percentage-wise, just to guess, ballpark, 10%, 20%?
No idea. I really I would not feel comfortable making a guess on that. What I will say is that we are raised in America to worship capitalism, the American idea of capitalism, not necessarily the anarcho-communist one. We are raised and indoctrinated from birth that it's like our religion in a lot of ways. It's our national religion is capitalism.
Right. I'm talking about let's assume that we actually got through all the bullshit and stop the brainwashing and all that kind of crap and let people actually decide. If you took all the population of the United States and were able to successfully get them to stop thinking in the lines of the bullshit, support the state form of capitalism, support the state form of communism, support the state in any way, what shape or form, everyone's an anarchist now. As we assume this as a general rule, you would have to, at least in my opinion, would have to admit that at a bare minimum you would have a 30% of the population who would fall in line with the anarcho-communist perspective if, given the choice between the two.
I would say it might even more closely mirror the way our electorate vote breaks up, because I think that...
So what percentage?
It might even be close to 50-50, to tell you the truth.
Great. That's all I wanted. Okay, now that we have established that there would be a significant amount of people who would want to establish anarcho-communist type systems, where they are prevalent all over.
Mm-hmm.
The anarcho-capitalists who are doing things like this farmer that we were talking about, this rancher, that were setting up, factories and so on, and making, free exchanges where people still had the option of opting out and going to other things like what it is you would provide. Since all of this exists, and these people have all these options available to them, and if they voluntarily choose to be a participant in the anarcho-capitalist world, because they are weighing their options and they find, well, this one's more time effective. I actually am gaining more out of it. If that's their choice and they feel that they are benefiting from it, this is what anarcho-capitalism is espousing. Not that anarcho-capitalism be the rule of the day, that everyone across America or everywhere in this particular anarcho-capitalist world, would be using capitalism. That there would be a diverse selection of options where you might have worker-owned companies, worker-owned communes, worker-run systems, where people could be free to participate in those, and then there are also other people who provide capitalist type options. And if people choose to go with one or the other, that is their choice. They're not put into a system of structural violence where they have a choice to starve to death or work for a capitalist. They have the choice. They don't have to starve to death if they don't want to work for a capitalist. They can do what they want. And in that regard, I would like to express to you that perhaps, since you said that it was okay for this type of situation to occur, that you might be an anarcho-capitalist, even though you might call yourself an anarcho-communist.
Absolutely not. But what I will say is what you're describing is a post-revolution political struggle. This is assuming that we have destroyed the state, and by that I mean the military and the police, replaced it with nothing, which includes private security firms, so that no one can use violence in that big structural way against each other. And what would happen then is you would see a struggle between the anarcho-communists and the anarcho-capitalists, and ultimately the people would decide which system works better for them. I don't think the two systems can work in conjunction with each other. Economic systems are global. One will swallow the other. The question is, which one and for how long?
All right, well, there you have it. This has been the Anarchist Experience. I do want to again thank my guest Brenton for joining us. Brenton Lengel is available at brentonlengel.com.
Really fun.
And thank you again for joining me. Take care.